So, by the way, I forgot or got busy to post the notes and recordings last week, so I'm going to do them both this week. I remembered one other thing I wanted to maybe discuss. What was it called? What's that feature again? Oh yeah, Turbofish.
Hey.
We'll come back to that. So these are a little out of date. It's okay. Shepherded items. Let's start with that. Static Morse, you got a lot here.
Yeah, there's not, sorry, I'm a bit verbose. There's not a lot that is of urgent concern. Just there was a bit more discussion about what we talked about last week, with the conclusion being that it's not going to cause any new issues to allow something like BeckNew in an array initializer that aren't already caused by the snippet of code I posted here. And that because we already allow this, there's some implications down the line, like heap allocation and constants will require some extra hoop jumping. But
it seems like there's at least one complication that's not raised by this code, which is that there's like a dynamic semantics that exists today for BeckNew, right? Well, I guess today doesn't compile with BeckNew, but
it compiled literally today. It started compiling on stable. Because BeckNew is const fun as of 1.
Oh, you mean this const v? Yeah. But yeah. What I mean is in an array initializer context.
No.
Like, yeah, okay.
Right, does not compile today.
But there is like I guess I'm just saying there's a difference in that is a context where side effects can occur today, as long as the resulting value from the evaluating the expression is copy. You can have whatever you want in that array initializer array. Whereas in a const initializer, that's not the case. So I don't know how relevant that is, but it feels like it might make a difference to me.
It's definitely a little scary if adding const changes behavior to existing code.
What this would be like.
So what we would do is only try promotion for non-const things. So if you're currently writing,
if my library wasn't const and then I make my library const, that might change the consumer of my library's behavior, right?
I'm sorry, I misspoke. For non-copy things, so things that don't compile today, we would try promotion. So things that are copy would still have the side effects at runtime. Then if things are not copy, we would try the promotion. And there would be no effects, which is still kind of weird, but.
Okay, but that means then that if I'm const, if I add copy to the type that I'm returning from my const, it does something different.
Yes.
Which is weird.
Which is also scary.
I'm a little nervous just because whenever there's an if, when people are talking about type systems and they use the word if, that's bad. And here we're saying if it's copy, then do one thing, else we'll do something else. It's not that it can't be phrased, but it makes inference more complicated. It makes a lot of things more complicated.
That's actually an interesting general Niko. It seems like in general, if in language design you're using an if in certain ways, you're talking about non-orthogonal syntax or non-orthogonal design.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to, I think this case actually is not so bad. But usually when you're saying if, especially around like coercions or something, it implies that you can decide that, and it might be that you need type information from later on to make that decision. And that could be the case here too, but like it could be that the full type of that expression is not locally inferred, but results from later statements we haven't seen yet. And so we don't know if it's copy or not. But that would mean we have to defer the check whether it's const or not, which we probably can do. So like architecturally, this might be a case where it works out just fine. But besides the concerns that Scott was raising, I would raise those. I think this const qualification stuff happens actually pretty late now that I think about it, like in Mir or something like that.
Yeah, it does.
So maybe it's fine because we can keep type checking the whole thing and then we'll just check later after it's all done and all types are inferred. We can kind of come back and make sure it all worked out.
I think it would probably be fine in this case, although I'm not as familiar with this as you guys are. But the sort of in the abstract, I think that point is a good one to consider.
But so BeckNew shouldn't introduce any like new problems that we didn't have, like with optional Beck or something. Like if you say none, and if you hide that bit behind some const FN or some generic const.
No, BeckNew isn't the problem. It's the language feature that's the problem.
Yeah.
I think I'm skipping ahead a bit to debugation. Not promotion per se.
Well, you couldn't. Yeah, I mean, the sort of right now it's really only intended for very short. Anything more complicated that we currently do promotion on needs to end up in a const fund, basically. So like just none doesn't really raise the issues around side effects or.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was trying to construct a problematic example of like why we need const heap, or I was trying to get away from const heap, trying to see if we can statically detect, do something that makes it unnecessary. But whatever I tried, it doesn't work.
Probably good for offline discussion. Because yeah, just pop into the Zulu channel or that issue about heap allocation, which is massive, but has a lot of the background where this is needed. Okay, and then we're working on constiff. I'm done. So if I think Niko's not here to drive. If the unwind FFI interaction people want to speak, now would be a good time.
Are they here?
I'm gonna assume so. Yeah, I guess in the meantime, there's the diagnostics PR is going to break. If you look at the very last bullet point in my summary, the diagnostics PR, if we do it all the time and don't wait for the mirror const checker to fail, it's going to break some code that we currently allow unstable, where you have a loop that unconditionally exits. Because by the time it gets lowered to mirror, it doesn't actually have any like things that are typical of loops. But like I said, we could discuss that at another time.
I think we should probably go forward.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So do you want to speak, Niko? Do you want to speak for the FFI stuff?
So there's no real updates for the unwind FFI. We just didn't have time to do much. For the DIN trait thing, I talked about last time this proposal that was something of a breaking change to fit as a sort of inevitable. I did a crater run. I found that a lot of crates are affected, but I haven't had time to look how much of that is root breakage versus derived crates, and I haven't analyzed it at all to see. That could mean a lot. It could mean very little. So I'll hopefully get time to do that this week. But, yeah, I don't know if there are any further updates in these items. I don't think so. Central and I already discussed his comments on here, but we're working on the how logic is interested in pursuing the lint around fallback. So, okay, jump ahead. Felix, there's this PR about attribute macros on inline modules. You had a bunch of comments with Petroshenkov about it.
No, okay. I thought last time, if I'm thinking the same thing that we're talking about, I could have sworn something where I said, okay, let's merge this. Am I wrong? I thought it was locked on central. Am I thinking of something else? I must be thinking of something else. No, I'm wrong. I misremembered. Okay, now I remember what this is. Thank you. Okay, this was something we talked about, and the issue. This is the one that's we had a discussion, and Boats was going to leave a comment, but then the Lang team meeting was like rapidly approaching, and for some reason I decided to take charge and leave a comment instead, trying to represent the Lang team's perspective. And this is the one that was about about having proc macro attribute style macros that can be applied to modules. And the thing is that as written, this proposal is just to stabilize it solely on inline modules. And when I read our discussion and / my memory of our discussion, I had thought that our whole problem that we had at least I might have misremembered the actual situation or misunderstood the situation when we had the conversation. I thought it was something about like inner attributes versus outer attributes in terms of what we were stabilizing. For some reason, I was under the impression that like outer attributes on out-of-line modules would be fine and would work. But in fact, that's not the case at all. This is truly only stabilizing attributes on inline modules, not any kind of out-of-line module. And so at first when I was reading this, I was like, once I came around to understand the situation, I was thinking to myself, okay, is the situation one where we should stabilize what's being proposed? And then I switched to being like, well, wait, I don't even know if this even makes any sense to try to stabilize, because our whole problem that we had, or rather the concern that was raised was, do we have to stabilize this now where it only supports the inline case versus supporting every kind of module? And what's the use case? Like, why is it that there's a pressure to stabilize this? What's the use case where it's good to have support for proc macro attributes when it only works in inline modules? So it seemed to me like Petrochenkov's response is kind of like, well, it'd be nice to stabilize it because we're stable, because there's other features around macros that are going to land in the 1.40 cycle. I personally am not too swayed by that argument myself. But maybe more importantly, somebody else posted a use case, their own use case for wanting to have this, even if it is only for inline modules. I didn't read that. I'll be honest, I didn't read the comment they posted too carefully, but at least there are other consumers out there that said they'd have a use for this. So I wanted to raise it with the team, with the meeting again, in part because I wasn't even sure if we, like I said, I may have misremembered the situation of the previous meeting. Might be everyone understood this except for me during that conversation, but I wanted to be clear in terms of what is supported here, and make sure we all understood that, and then maybe revisit the question of, okay, well, do we only want to stabilize this one piece as is being suggested here, or do we want to push back and say, no, it's better to wait until we have support for both inline and out-of-line modules once we've resolved the problems, something around those. So that's the issue I wanted to raise, basically, because I felt like I wasn't representing, if you can call it, it wasn't consensus in any case amongst the Lang team. It was more like, I don't think I was the person that concerned the Lang team properly at that point, so I wanted to re-raise it with us to get a discussion here again.
So to summarize the technical aspect, I think, so it doesn't make a difference if it's an inner or outer attribute, but it's allowed on inline attributes, but not on outline file. Sorry, it's allowed on. It's not allowed on inline. It's allowed on inline modules, but not on file modules. But if the attribute is on an inline module and if there happens to be a file module inside that module, that is also not allowed. I believe that's the case.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a deeply recursive thing in terms of like a file module inside the inline module makes the thing not work or not.
I think it is. At least the feature gating PR that I reviewed had those semantics.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was too, and I thought that was sort of like just rather complicated rules. And
Yeah,
so
I agree.
As far as I know, we all sort of just want the semantics, that we don't preload the modules. and we want if like the macro wants to read the inside of an external module, there should be some sort of API literally. So I don't know why I don't just decide those semantics and stabilize them on all mod statements.
I think it's mostly a question of like compiler infrastructure and doing a bunch of refactorings. So it's more a question of like time. But I don't think that's a good justification for doing the partial stuff.
I'm not sure what refactorings you mean necessarily, but I also think that we could stabilize it without having the API to let you, easily load modules. It could be useless. It could be that if you put the attribute on an external mod statement, all you get is the mod statement, and you can't really do anything with that. But
the semantics we want is that like it doesn't load the module, right?
Yeah, but then Petr refers to like there being an API that lets the macro decide that it wants to see the inside of the module before it's finished.
I believe doing the not loading the module might require some refactoring in the compiler. And that might take some time. At least I might be wrong, but that's what I think is the case. But I personally don't see any reason to change our minds here. Does anyone think that the things we said last time?
So the only question is about the use case that Robbie Pop posted in the thread, but even there, it's like something where they list this, and it's like they said this is. It's funny. They said this is basically one of the 2 remaining nightly features we are using. So it's not that this is the last one remaining, but it's just interesting.
Can I ask a question? The the semantics of lazily loading modules, I tend to agree that's probably what we want. But is this something that was in an RFC that was decided? Like, how are these where and how is this discussion happening? And I would feel pretty good about saying we can stabilize this without an API to make it useful if I felt good that we had decided the semantics, but I sort of feel confused about that.
Well, this proposal is to decide the stuff where we don't have to pick those semantics, right? So this is, Petr PR is everything that doesn't interact with those semantics.
Yeah, I understand that. I feel fine about deciding it. I guess I'm just raising a question of like,
yeah,
I don't know what's happening with this design or where it's happening, and I would like to know. Maybe the answer is it's not happening, and that's precisely why we're trying to make this like cookie cutter.
I mean, I'm assuming that the discussion's happening on the tracking issue for proc macros and macros 2.0, but maybe or hygiene 2.0, but maybe I'm wrong about that inference.
Seems plausible. Seems like a good case for some kind of shepherding approach. Like, seems like if none of us in the Lang team are following this discussion, then wherever it's happening is.
I feel like a lot of it is happening in Petr mind. So, like, some way of writing it down would be.
That is definitely true.
Yeah, that doesn't seem altogether bad.
No, yeah, but
it would just be nice to write it down and document that we made the decision to do it.
Let's see. Actually, I think I have a link here. So issue 64197. So at the moment, at least conditional compilation works by like when you put an attribute on a module on a file module, then that will directly call a conditional compilation in the parser, which is quite a weird thing to do. But like that's one of those hacks that exist in the compiler. I think this is relevant for now.
So I think there's also the point that, which might be part of like Petr reasoning, that inline modules that have mod statements in them that aren't also inline modules are very weird. And one of those things that is sort of like technically allowed and most people don't know and no one really uses it intentionally. I think, somewhere in the Rust repo we use it, which is sort of one of those weird things about the Rust repo. And so having this exception where, there's a lot of inline mod statements unless they contain non-inline mod statements, like that exception is like never something that's going to come up in practice for people. And so this is in effect letting them apply attributes to inline mod statements while delaying the semantic.
I don't know about that. I introduced like a week or a few weeks ago. I introduced one of these cases. So,
but you really
still got Taylor's not here. I remember his efforts to figure out what path handling should be around this.
It was like it's
very confusing where the file is supposed to be at.
It was some refactoring I was making, and it was just easier to refactor and keep it that way. It had to do fewer changes, and the diff became cleaner. So this was actually I think it's used more than you might think, or at least I think it's useful.
I mean, regardless, it's a part of the language. I don't know. So I agree that for most users, the rule of you can apply a pack macro to an inline module, but not an out of line is all they have to remember. But
yeah, it doesn't seem like a hard rule to remember if you assume that proc macros apply to tokens and not to, and modules don't magically inline their tokens.
I don't know. I kind of feel like we could go forward with this personally. I do agree it's a little bit strange, and I would rather be just as happy to. I think I'd be just as happy to make the semantics be lazy loading, but it also seems okay to have it error out.
I don't think so. So I basically think it's a matter of doing the work to get lazy loading to actually work, and that would take some time. It's mostly a question of execution.
Right. Well, the point is, we could, if we were firmly committed, we could stabilize it such that you have no API to do lazy loading, but you get module tokens, and all you can do is reproduce them right now, and we could run with that. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like we're spending a lot of time on this, but not that it's not important. But, we should decide one way or the other.
I personally don't feel like having a solution for out-of-line modules should block us from doing what seems like the only reasonable behavior for inline modules.
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. I feel like we shouldn't hold up on that reason. It's not good enough. But I would like to address the problem of, I would just like to know that we've documented this somewhere and that we can point people at it. But I don't think, could we put it in the Rust reference? Just the rule that you can apply. For one thing, I think the rule of, to me personally, saying you can apply it to inline, you cannot apply procedural macros to out-of-line modules, and that it's transitive that is also true if they appear inside of something that you apply to procedural macro to. I assume it also applies to out-of-line modules and functions, or maybe we finally got rid of those. I don't know, but we used to allow them so that seems fine to me. I would sort of expect that, and that sort of unifies all the rules into one. But
yeah, I think it's fine. I would like to it'd be ideal if we had. It'd feel better if we had a group that was organized around working on this. Petrochenkov probably being in the lead of it.
Right.
That was.
I think I agree with that.
What the plan for what steps in the future we're going to be taking. so we don't feel, we can feel confident that we're just going to be left in this state forever.
Yeah, I would feel a lot better if we had a plan and this was a step. It's a reasonable step to take. It just feels weird to be taking it without any notion of where we're walking to. But that's kind of.
It is funny we don't have macros working group, do we?
Mm.
I think that's kind of on
Macros
us
2.0.
a little bit to try to find such a person and get them doing it.
So just to quickly answer the question, at least if you look at the feature gating PR, what it does is that it takes like an annotatable thing, and then it curses down and feature gates any non-inline modules, basically, just a walker. It's quite simple, actually. Yeah, but it would be easy to I think add a note to a reference for this. As for a working group, there is Petrochenko, Alex Red, and the person who wrote the eager expansion, RFC, and maybe Felix.
Okay, so I nominate that we add this to a list of like things to try to organize, but we allow this step to go forward. That's my proposal.
Okay.
I will try to make that list. Did my homework.
Do you want to write the comments? And,
sure, I'll make the comment.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we might as well get this question out of the way right now. Like I said, Petroshenkov, I think, was hoping to get this in 1.40. Are we interested in just immediately saying it's not going to get backported? Or are we not going to decide that yet?
The release team would be very unhappy to do that.
Yeah, I don't really think that's something we need to worry about. Like, I feel like that's more compiler and releases problem. But I think we do have a usual policy of not backporting for like stabilizations. So I would apply that here personally.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So the exciting part is it's 30 minutes in and we have a little time. I put down 3 things we could spend some of this time on. For Turbofish, I don't want to say a lot except to say that I was rethinking after our discussion last time. I agree with kind of everything that we said, except that I said something like, I'd be game to take on that thread. And then I was thinking, I don't know if that's true. And specifically, not because I'm like afraid of the thread. I think the approach, if we were going to go forward, is I would want to go in and get a good understanding of everyone's concerns, write them all out, and try to move forward or backward or whatever. But it seems like a lot of energy, and I know how short our time is these days, and it just doesn't feel like the priority lines up. So I don't know what that exactly is. I think my preference here is, I think we don't have to reach an immediate decision today. It's probably a good idea to do some of the steps we talked about, like talking to Scott. But I also would be okay if we said we don't feel we have this is not the best use of our time to try to resolve these concerns right now. But this might tie a little bit into the roadmap bullet point of like, if it's a prioritization decision, maybe we should be talking about it more holistically. But I want to put that out there. Any thoughts, or should we talk about roadmap?
So the only point I would make is that I think with respect to roadmap, it feels like this sort of thing that would never be high enough priority to like. It's not big enough to be high, like something you put on a roadmap. It's one of those small changes.
It by itself, well, we should ask what the shape of a roadmap even is, but it by itself doesn't seem like it would make it, but I could imagine there being a, you know, it being part of a larger group, a thematic step or something of simplifying. Removing small roadblocks, that kind of thing. I agree, though, that it's in an awkward space of being like extremely controversial and not that important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good summary.
But I think that that's sort of like, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the Waker context stuff on the Features API, that I thought and still think that like adding the context indirection to the features like function signature was not ever going to be useful for anything. But I recognized that like other people felt a lot more strongly about wanting to have it than I felt about not having it. And when there's that sort of asymmetry in opinion where I think it's like doing this, like option A would be a mild improvement, whereas other people think that option B is like absolutely necessary, just accepting like that I can only do make so many improvements. It's not worth arguing against like the weight that people put on the other side.
I think that's wise. I think the only distinction I would draw is that in that instance, because I kind of agreed with, I think I agree with your assessment, but I also felt like I would add the one other bullet point of like, that was sort of a detail I didn't expect many end users to encounter. Whereas I think Turbofish is something that, the only reason that I would nudge it any higher is that ordinary Rust users do encounter it on a regular basis. But it still feels like it's not, if I think of all the things I want to spend time building consensus around, I'm not sure it makes the list.
Right, yeah, I agree. I don't think it's unimportant, there are just more important things.
And maybe someday there won't be more important things.
Right. I think that will come a time.
As hard as it might seem today.
I mean, if anybody wants to sit down and make ascription completely work, then maybe that's a path to getting rid of Turbofish.
It's true that many of the use cases fall into that category. So let's talk a little bit about roadmap, maybe. Well, I mean, I don't know if I want to. Do we want to reach a firm conclusion here? Maybe we do. So one thing we can do with this conclusion is we can postpone this RFC. Regardless, I think we should close the RFC. Like, whatever.
Or at least unlock it. The whole point here is just about unlocking it, right?
What?
Well, part of the whole thing was to unlock it first of all, right? That was what the whole thing that started this was Boats was saying that someone should unlock this and it shouldn't be Boats.
Yeah, but we're not just going to unlock it and leave it open, are we?
We could just leave it locked and like have an internal discussion, like since talked about last time that like the experimentation idea, that they didn't feel that they would. That would be something that would convince them to maybe go ahead and stabilize it one day.
Wait, what? I didn't hear the last thing you said, sorry.
So last time, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you said something like, so the idea was that we would do some experimentation on Nightly and figure out the effects on like text editors and other things, and maybe after a year or something, we would like if there were no problems, we would go ahead and stabilize it. But that you felt that you would not be convinced by.
So I'll try and say what I was saying again in case I can do a better job. If compiler wants to use a GLR parser or something like that, that's totally up to them to do whatever they feel is best. I'm happy for them to do whatever. I'm worried that this is one of those cases that is like a philosophical feeling more than something that would be really amenable to, hey, we migrated these two little projects over and everything was fine, so everything's great now, obviously. And I don't want us to hit a like, we go, well, let's experiment with it, and then just have all the same things raised again.
Is that a philosophical difference that you have, or is that something you think, like, I'm sure other people have it, but is that something you have?
I think I have it at least somewhat. One of the things that I enjoyed finding about Rust when I found it the first time was not having like a Scott Meyer's most vexing parse thing of something that backtracks that almost always does what you want, except there's this one particular corner over here where sometimes you try to do something and it just doesn't do the right thing, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
Okay, I don't want to get too far into this, to turbo or not to turbo in this moment, but I mean, I think this is an interesting discussion, but we're really trying to figure out what to do with this thread, right? And I think my point is, if I were going to go forward with it, I'd probably close it and reopen it regardless, just because I hate having to click view more.
Yeah.
If nothing else. And because I don't want people to know with all that context.
Talk about roadmap plans. That's a roadmap plan. Killing view more is a matter of policy. When RFC hits that number of comments, you just say no.
You just close it.
Are we going to write? Go ahead.
I think that I mean I'd rather postpone it than leave it locked. Like leaving it locked is effectively saying that we postpone it, but then doing something
Right, not admitting it.
I would agree with that. If we can come up with a plan in the next like week or two that amounts to here's why we'd feel comfortable reopening it and resolving it, then I'm all for it. If we can't, then I would be all for just RFC bot postpone, check the boxes, and then say we'd love to revisit this in the future when we have the energy, and then do it in the future.
No, that seems quite reasonable.
I think
that also seems like, I actually think that would fit well with, insert obvious segue here, with the roadmap plans that Niko and I are looking at. I think that the determining factor for whether we want to postpone this or whether we want to reopen it would be, is this on anyone's roadmap to actually work on? So if nobody wants to spend the time to shepherd that proposal, then we should just postpone it. If somebody's willing to spend the time to be the champion, then we hand it over to them and they shepherd it, and they can take care of all of the emotional energy of dealing with that thread. So why don't we do the thing of putting a roadmap together collaboratively and then see if killing turbofish is on anybody's roadmap?
Well, let's talk about roadmap a little bit then.
Right, I didn't mean doing it today. I meant talking about doing it today.
Right. So what does it even mean to do a roadmap? I think is a good question. But one of the things that Josh and I were talking about, I guess I would say more generally, is it would be nice if we were, as part of the shepherding move, if we were kind of exposing what are our priorities and queues as individuals and as a team. And one of the ways to get started we thought about is if we could have a meeting where we each kind of bring in the things we think we might like to do, the things that seem important to us, and we can discuss which ones make sense and that's like a starting point for us to put those together and be realistic about what kind of priorities of the team should be and who would drive each one forward. I like the idea of, like, when it comes to turbofish, like, let's make that decision based on, does somebody want to do it and feel like it's a good use of their energy.
Also worth keeping in mind, like the compiler team's priorities to actually implement things and.
Yeah, I think part of the consideration here should be exactly like we need to find all the people we need to do it, and not just the Lang team didn't go off and do something on their own that's not paired with like implementators.
One, I don't know how much to go into this right now, but one idea I've had is that like when we accept an RFC, if we like had someone sign up to do the implementation right then, like maybe as a requirement, that might be a good idea.
Yeah, I would like to do that. I would like to separate out. I'm a little confused on what I'm even proposing we talk about. So there are two things, or three maybe, we could. But one of them is very concretely like we should have a meeting, a singular meeting, in which we bring priorities to discuss around the next period of time. And the other would be more generally how we manage larger feature development, which I also agree with you on that central. I like that idea.
I'd like to propose a slight topic partition here, which is I feel like our biggest problem as the Lang team is not well-specified features that have been accepted but are backlogged on implementation. That's a problem that exists, I agree, but that's a problem where that's more a matter of developer time than it is design time, and there are a lot more developers than there are designers. So my bigger concern would be backlog of ideas that are somewhere between we probably care about this and actual concrete design, RFC, and acceptance. That seems like the backlog that we need more process to solve, at least at the moment. They're both independent problems. They both need solving, but let's focus on one.
I'm not sure if I'm thinking about it. Where does something like specialization fall in that category?
Have we actually completely decided that the current design is viable and somebody just needs to sit down and do the work?
I think so.
I think we decided, I think it needs to be done before we know if it's viable.
That's
yeah.
true.
And I think that's a good, not just a good point about specialization, it's a good point in general. Like if you, oftentimes you find out during the implementation, like this part of the design makes no sense. But like the way I specified this, like this grammar makes, that's not a good idea if you actually try to implement it. And so that feeds back into like designer time. So it's true that we have more designers than we have implementers, but we also have a really big backlog of things.
Right. That's exactly why I've been wanting to push for more like a process where we say we're going to start, more like the shepherded groups we're doing around const eval, right? That we get feedback as we go, and we hopefully use the RFC process for major turning points in the design space. But how do we feel about doing that meeting? Does that seem useful?
That makes good sense.
All right. We can schedule a time for that, I guess.
By the way, the core team roadmap, when is that? It seems relevant to sync up with that.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the blog post, we had a timeline. It included a timeline. So let's bring it up.
We'll review the post December 1st.
Right. Is that where it says? I can't even find it right now. There we go.
Until 1 or 2 weeks after.
So I think I think it's a good idea for us to do this soon.
Yeah.
Maybe next week or something like that.
Sounds good.
I think another thing to think about, I'll put it, I guess, in the email, but is not only like what, I don't know, not just like what we might like to do, but maybe should think about the why or the bigger problems or how a roadmap actually looks. Okay, we have 10 minutes. I had another bullet point, though I'm not sure if we are done with this discussion. We could turn a little bit more to the, like I wanted to talk a little bit about just general procedures and how we're managing RFCs and so forth. And we were kind of getting into that a little, so maybe we could continue with that. Like Josh, you were mentioning separating out this question of design, backlog, implementation, how to think about that. I don't know if we finished that out or not.
I think so, yeah. I was mostly just saying let's not get bogged down on the problem of we have a lot of accepted RFCs that aren't implemented, when it seems like our more stressful problem is we have a lot of open RFCs or ideas that aren't yet RFCs.
I might phrase that slightly differently as we have a lot of things that keep coming up that don't quite turn into RFCs and aren't necessarily things that are ready to get approved or that we're happy to approve or something like that. And then we have a whole backlog of RFCs that people wrote that I think we might all agree are not things that we want, but we don't go through and do anything about them. Because we have an awful lot of RFCs open, for example, right?
So actually, that's kind of interesting. That's another, I sort of like this question of what do we all see as the problems we have? And how important are they relative to one another? I think I agree with all those problems. Like, I think we shouldn't have, I think the time from design to done is much too long for us right now, and I think it causes a lot of stress in different ways. And I think that doesn't necessarily imply that we should go pick up all the things that were RFC'd and not implemented, but it does imply that we should try to not create new ones that last a long time. And probably at least some of them we should be closing out because they are important, like specialization jumps to mind.
I think that's a good idea, but it's also like when you have big architectural changes in the compiler that affect many features, like generic associated types, specialization, like generic closures, and all of those are sort of depending on Chuck, and that is taking a lot of time.
Yeah, so we should. That's right. But I think it may affect then what we choose to work on. We should try to look for things that we can see through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See through in terms of stabilizing or.
Yeah, stabilizing something.
Yeah, I just looked, for example, we have RFCs open tagged lang from June 2017.
I think there are two issues. One that Niko identified. Yeah, we just aren't really, like, there are several features that we've wanted for 3 or 4 years now and don't even have a nightly yet. And then I think just that the RFC process, because it can't handle large threads, has just gotten like broken in a lot of ways. And so we started routing around the RFC process instead of using it. And so that's why we never end up reviewing RFCs in this meeting. We make a lot of decisions on just Rust issues now, which was what RFCs were supposed to stop us from doing.
Yeah.
And like right now we're in practice not using the RFC process very much.
To be fair, my take on things is that the RFC process was meant to stop them from doing implementation work that then got thrown away. And I think that's
true.
that still doesn't happen as much as it used to when the
That's
RFC process.
There was a comment someone made earlier in this meeting even about where is the discussion happening on that. I thought that's what the RFC process was supposed to be for. That means I think we might have both sides of the problem.
I see the RFC process as serving several needs, but like advertising, building consensus, making sure people know what's happening, giving legitimacy to the decision.
Documenting.
Right, documenting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen several features where like there are several proposals, not necessarily laying, but like on different issues where I thought that we just needed to have an RFC because I didn't think there was enough evidence of consensus.
Right.
But the problem is the RFC process, because it can't handle when a thread gets out of hand. We've all started like avoiding it at different levels.
I think we also, so one of the reasons that we are avoiding it, but I think we are also dealing with smaller issues, smaller decisions.
But when we make those small steps without a larger, and this is exactly what I'm talking about the proc macro thing just a second ago, that like if we don't feel like we have a larger roadmap, it starts to feel like we're just taking arbitrary steps.
That one is a good example of like not so small, really.
Yeah, we sort of have this strange thing, I feel, where we said in the roadmap we're going to finish things, which sort of implies that we're not going to have RFCs, which sort of results in people phrasing things as, well, I just sort of cleaned this up. And then there's an issue or a PR, and then that's there, and things just sort of happen in random places. And we do have some big projects that are doing a lot more coordination, like people we have here and that kind of sort of thing. But there's some things that feel like little side things that are just sort of happening sometimes.
So we're almost out of time for the meeting. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I've been wanting to have something like this for a while. I want to propose we should probably try to discuss this too. I have some very specific ideas that I didn't get around time to bring up. But I'm tired of blocking on me having time to write them up, which never happens. So should we try to have a focused discussion on this? Like on how to run ourselves a little better as well? Should that be part of roadmap? It feels separate from roadmap to me, but intertangled.
I feel like the improvements we could make to the process are somewhat orthogonal, not entirely, but somewhat orthogonal to which things do we care about driving forward in the near term. Shortening our list will also make it feel like any potential process changes, we can prioritize trying them with the new things that are our priorities, rather than feeling like any process change has to address our giant backlog.
Okay. I think I agree that it's orthogonal. I think the only way that it's not is that it might give us vocabulary with which we use to form the road, like talk about the roadmap, like if we're talking about shepherded things, for example. It's just a different way of looking at stuff. But it's okay. We gotta start somewhere. Let's try to have those conversations, I guess. To start. So we have two basic things. We're going to organize a roadmap. Maybe not me. Maybe Josh will do this. We'll see. Organize a roadmap meeting and organize some procedural discussion. Sound plausible? Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for the meeting. It was kind of fun not to have a huge agenda today. Ciao.
Happy release day, everyone.
Oh yeah, wait. Oh, it's too late. Before everyone goes, I forgot. I wanted to start out with, I don't know what exactly. We should all celebrate async await is stable. This was a big lift.
Yay.
Felix, good job.
Hey.
I would like to present this virtual cake to all of you. Okay. Goodbye.
We eagerly await the cake.
Oh, no. Bye, y'all.